Level 1, the word. You don't apply. You don't get assigned. You don't wake up one morning with orders in your inbox and a new unit patch on your shoulder. You volunteer. That single word, volunteer, this is the first wall, not a physical wall, not a ruck march or a cold river or a 72-hour sleepless navigation exercise, just a word. And the Army has built an entire culture around it because that word does something to a man before he ever sets foot on the sandhills of Fort Liberty. It reveals something about how he sees himself, about how he tolerates discomfort, about what he believes he is capable of becoming. Every other formation in the United States Army receives soldiers. Special Forces selects them, they cheer. But only after those soldiers first select themselves. You are either active duty, infantry, armor, artillery, signals, any MOS. And you've submitted a packet through your chain of command. Your commander signs it. Your medical records are reviewed. Your physical fitness scores are scrutinized. Or you are a civilian who walked into a recruiting station and signed an 18X contract, the direct pipeline that lets a man with 0 military experience enter the Special Forces qualification course before he's ever worn a uniform for more than a few weeks. Either way, you knew what you were signing. You need a score of 110 or higher on the general technical section of the SFAS. You need a secret security clearance. You need to be airborne qualified, or willing to become airborne qualified at Fort Moore, Georgia, where you will exit a perfectly functional aircraft 5 times in 3 weeks to earn a pair of silver wings small enough to fit in your palm but heavy enough that the men who wear them never forget what they cost. And you need to be a US citizen, or a lawful permanent resident on the verified path to citizenship. The requirements are not the hard part. The hard part is that you know, and before you sign, before you show up, before the first ruck is loaded, that the pipeline ahead is nearly 2 years long, that the attrition rate will destroy the majority of the men who enter it alongside you, that statistically, more than half the men standing next to you at Fort Liberty will be gone before it ends. You sign anyway. That is the first test, and it has already begun. Level 2, the selection, 24 days. That is the length of Special Forces Assessment and Selection, SFAS, at Fort Liberty, North Carolina. 24 days in the sandhills and pine forests of the training area. 24 days during which the cadre will watch you constantly, document everything, and say almost nothing. SFAS is not designed to teach you anything. That is critical to understand. There is no instruction here, no feedback after each event, no score posted on a board. The cadre are not teachers, they are observers. They are looking for something that exists in you already, or doesn't. You ruck march every day. The distances grow. The load on your back runs between 50 and 70 pounds. Kit, water, food, the weight of the decision you made when you volunteered. You move through terrain that does not cooperate. Sand that swallows your boots. Pine forests in the dark. Hills that have no tactical value and every psychological one. Your feet blister. Your hips bruise under the ruck's weight. Your shoulders learn a new vocabulary of pain. You navigate alone at night. Map and compass. No GPS. No partner. The woods are dark and the checkpoints are not marked with lights. You find them or you don't. And when no one is watching, when the cadre can't possibly see you, when you've been moving for 6 hours and the next checkpoint is half a mile uphill, that is precisely when they are watching. That is when the evaluation is most precise. You solve problems in teams, and the teams are watching each other. Peer evaluations at SFAS are not informal, they are structural. The men around you are rating you, not on your ruck times or your land navigation scores. On you, on whether you help the man struggling behind you or accelerate away from him, on whether you lead when no one asked you to lead, on whether you follow when it isn't your turn to command, on whether you quit when the only witness is yourself. Historically, the selection rate at SFAS holds near 50%. Half the men who arrive do not advance. Some fail physically. The body simply does not have what the course demands, no matter the will behind it. Some fail psychologically, not through overt breakdown, but through subtle patterns the cadre have been trained over years to recognize. Some fail the peer evaluation. They may be the strongest man in their group. They may never miss a checkpoint, but the men around them have observed something difficult to name but impossible to ignore. And the team has spoken. If you you are selected, you receive notification, no ceremony, no fanfare, a notification, and then you move forward into the Special Forces Qualification Course, the Q-Course, the longest and most comprehensive special operations training pipeline in the American military. Depending on your specialty, it runs between 56 and 95 weeks, nearly 2 years. You are not the same man who volunteered. You are not yet what the Q-Course will make you. You are standing at the threshold, selected but not yet qualified, and the real work is just beginning. Level 3, the Forge. The Q-Course does not teach you to be a soldier. You are already a soldier. The Q-Course dismantles what you think a soldier is, and reconstructs it into something the conventional army has no template for. Phase 2 begins with small unit tactics, the language of ground combat spoken at the team level, patrolling, ambushes, raids, reconnaissance, land navigation executed at a standard that makes SFAS look like orientation. Mission planning that begins not with a map, but with intelligence, with questions about the human terrain before the physical one. Then phase 3 arrives, and this is where the Green Beret diverges from every other operator in every other tier of American Special Operations. You are assigned a specialty, 18 Bravo, Weapons Sergeant. You become the team's authority on weapons. Not American weapons, but all weapons. AK-pattern rifles, RPG-7s, PKM machine guns. Mortars manufactured in Czechoslovakia in 1974. Anti-armor systems you've never touched but will learn to field strip blindfolded because the men you'll be training overseas have never heard of an M4 and have no intention of using one. You learn the global inventory of violence, not to glorify it, but because the soldiers you will train across a dozen countries already have it in their hands. 18 Charlie, Engineer Sergeant, Demolitions, Improvised Munitions, Explosives Calculation, precise enough to drop a bridge span exactly where you intend it to fall, but also, and this is what surprises people, construction, welding, electrical wiring, plumbing, masonry. You can destroy infrastructure and you can build it, often in the same week, in the same village, for the same people. 18 Delta, Medical Sergeant, 250 days of medical training, not EMT level training, not field medic training with a tourniquet and a prayer. You rotate through civilian emergency rooms. You perform surgical procedures. You manage cardiac emergencies, infectious disease outbreaks, veterinary cases for pack animals used by the indigenous forces you support. You are trained to a level that sits between a paramedic and a physician, and you will apply that training in environments where the nearest surgical facility is a helicopter ride away on a good day, and a body bag away on a bad one. 18 Echo, Communications Sergeant, you are the team's connection to everything outside the wire. Encrypted tactical communications, antenna theory and construction from improvised materials, radio wave propagation across terrain that kills signal, burst transmission that compresses minutes of data into a fraction of a second to reduce the intercept window. When the ODA is isolated, and the ODA will be isolated, you are the reason they are not alone. Phase 4, Robin Sage. 15 rural counties in North Carolina become a fictional country. You become a member of an operational detachment alpha operating in denied territory. You make contact with a guerrilla force played by local volunteers, civilians, former soldiers, people who have been part of this exercise for years and who take it seriously enough that the line between training and reality is deliberately, strategically blurred. You organize them, you train them, you advise them, you build trust in hours with men you've never met in a language you've been studying for months toward an objective you've been planning for days. Everything the Q-Course has taught you either works here or it doesn't. Phase 5, language, Arabic, Russian, Spanish, Mandarin, French, Dari, Pashto. You are assigned the language that corresponds to the Special Forces group you will join and the region of the world where you will spend the next decade of your operational career. You are not expected to achieve fluency. You are expected to achieve functional communication, enough to sit across a table from a foreign military officer and conduct business in his language, enough to demonstrate respect before you've demonstrated competence. And then, phase 6, you graduate. The Green Beret is placed on your head. The Special Forces tab is sewn onto your shoulder. You are awarded your 18 series MOS and promoted to Sergeant E5. De oppresso liber, you to free the oppressed. The motto is not marketing, it is operational doctrines. You will spend your career among oppressed people, and you will teach them not to depend on America, but to fight without America. That is the mission. Now you're qualified to attempt it. Level 4, the team. You are assigned to a group. 1st Special Forces Group, Pacific and East Asia, Fort Lewis McChord, Washington. 3rd Special Forces Group, Africa, Fort Liberty. 5th Special Forces Group, Middle East and Central Asia, Fort Campbell, Kentucky. 7th Special Forces Group, Latin America, Eglin Air Force Base, Florida. 10th Special Forces Group, Europe and the former Soviet states, Fort Carson, Colorado. You report to an Operational Detachment Alpha, 12 men. The ODA is the fundamental unit of everything Special Forces does. 12 men who can insert into a denied area, locate an indigenous population, assess their military capacity, design a training program adapted to their culture and capability, execute that program under conditions that conventional units would classify as a logistical impossibility, and sustain the resulting force after the ODA departs, leaving behind capability that multiplies without American presence. The team structure is precise. A detachment commander, a captain, 1-8A, an assistant detachment commander, a warrant officer, 1-8-0A, a team sergeant, a master sergeant, 1-8Z, an intelligence sergeant, and 1-8F, 2 of each, weapons engineer, medical, communications. The ODA can split into 2 6-man elements. It does this regularly. Each half is independently capable of conducting the team's core mission. Because a force that requires its full complement to function is a force that can't function in the conditions where it will most often find itself. You are the newest man. You are an E5 with a Q-Course graduation date that is recent enough that the team sergeant will test you casually, in conversation, in the field, in moments you don't recognize this test until they've already concluded. Your Q-Course scores are irrelevant here. Your MOS knowledge is the baseline expectation, not the standard of distinction. What matters now is what you do when the answer isn't in a manual, what you do when the plan has failed, what you do at 0300 when the mission has gone sideways and the team needs the 18 Delta to be exactly as good as the Q-Course promised he would be. You are good. You had better prove it. Level 5, the work. The deployment is the Green Berets laboratory. You deploy to a country in your group's area of responsibility, and you do not deploy to a forward operating base with a gym and a dining facility and air conditioning and internet and all the infrastructure that cushions conventional units from the environments they nominally operate in. You deploy to a compound, a village, a mountain camp, a jungle outpost. You live in the conditions of the men you are training. You eat what they eat. You sleep under the same roof, you endure the same heat, the same cold, the same logistical shortages. This is not self-punishment, this is strategy. Trust cannot be purchased, it cannot be commanded, it cannot be transmitted by satellite or expressed in a PowerPoint briefing. It is built through proximity, through shared hardship, through the observation, which your indigenous counterparts make constantly and unconsciously, of whether the American advisor will stay when it becomes uncomfortable, whether he respects their culture or merely tolerates it, whether he learns their language as a professional obligation or as a human gesture. You train Afghan commandos in small unit tactics until they can execute raids without your supervision. You train Colombian soldiers in counter-narcotics operations until they understand the network, not just the target. You train African Special Operations Forces in counterterrorism until their doctrine reflects their terrain and their threats, not a template written in Fort Liberty. You do all of this in their language, functionally, with the cultural competency to understand not just what is being said, but what is being meant, the tribal dynamics beneath the military structure, the political calculations beneath the operational ones, the historical memory that shapes how your counterpart sees you and every American advisor who came before you. You are a soldier, you are a teacher, you are a diplomat, you are an intelligence asset operating in a human terrain that no satellite can map. The ODA's decisive weapon is not precision air support, though you can call it. It is not the weapons expertise of the 18 Bravo Mets, though that expertise is lethal. The ODA's decisive weapon is the ability to take one force and turn it into many, to train 20 soldiers who train 20 soldiers who train 20 more, until a capability exists in a country that can sustain itself after the last American leaves. You are a force multiplier. That phrase is the entire reason the Green Berets exist. Level 6, the Accumulation. You are a Sergeant First Class now. Ike 7, multiple multiple deployments. 4 rotations, 5. The specific number matters less than what those rotations contain. The kind of accumulated operational experience that cannot be replicated in a training environment, no matter how realistic, no matter how well designed. If you are an 18 Delta, you have managed trauma in conditions that would be classified as impossible in a civilian hospital. Gunshot wounds debrided in a dirt-floored clinic. Blast injuries triaged with equipment that fits in a ruck. You have conducted sick call for an Afghan village of 200 people and diagnosed conditions, tuberculosis, leishmaniasis, cardiac anomalies, using clinical skills you've maintained through rotations in civilian emergency rooms because the Q-Course built the foundation and you have spent years reinforcing it. If you are an 18 Bravo, you have stood in front of a formation of foreign soldiers who may be illiterate, who have been fighting for years with weapons they never received formal training on, and you have built a curriculum from nothing and taught it in a language you learned at a school in North Carolina. You have adapted your instruction to military traditions that bear no relationship to yours. You have succeeded often enough that the soldiers you trained are now training others. You may reclassify to 18 Foxtrot the Intelligence Sergeant, a transition that requires 2 years on an ODA and completion of the SF Intelligence Sergeant course. The 18F plans and conducts intelligence collection operations, establishes source networks, conducts target analysis, produces intelligence products that inform decisions above the team level. The 18F is the intersection of the Green Beret and the intelligence community, and the skills you develop in that specialty, source operations, network analysis, reporting tradecraft, are the same skills that route a significant number of departing operators toward the CIA's Special Activities Center, ground branch, where the agency's paramilitary operations officers come disproportionately from one population, Special Forces. You are 32 years old. You speak a foreign language well enough to conduct operational business in it. You have lived in countries most Americans will never see, doing work most Americans will never know occurred. And the men who will matter most when your record is evaluated are not the generals who signed your awards. They are the sergeants who serve beside you and the indigenous soldiers who are still fighting because you taught them how. Level 7, the Pinnacle. Master Sergeant, 18 Zulu, Team Sergeant. This is it. Not because the ranks above it are less. Company Sergeant Major, Battalion CSM. Group CSM are positions of real authority and institutional consequence. But those positions move you away from the ODA. The Team Sergeant is the operational pinnacle of the Special Forces NCO career. The rank the entire pipeline has been constructing since you raised your hand at a recruiting station or a battalion headquarters and said you wanted to try. The ODA has a captain. The captain has authority, legal authority, command authority, the authority of rank and position. He is 28 years old. He may be on his first or second ODA assignment. He has the Q-Course. He has 1 or 2 deployments. He is capable and he is learning. You have been on ODAs for 12 years. The relationship between Team Sergeant and Detachment Commander is the relationship that makes the ODA function. Not despite the disparity in experience, but because of it. The captain provides command authority and institutional access. You provide operational knowledge that cannot be taught, only accumulated. It is the relationship of a young CEO and a COO who was with the company before the CEO knew the industry existed. It works when both men understand what they're holding. You manage the team's training cycle. You own the standard. If the 18 Delta's trauma skills have degraded, you identify it and you fix it. Not with a memo, not with a counseling statement, but with a training event, because the standard exists for a reason that every man on the team understands. If the 18 Echo's comms equipment hasn't been maintained, the team is isolated without knowing it. If the 18 Bravo can't teach a foreign soldier to clear a malfunction on an AK-47, the man we trained dies because of a stoppage we never prepared him for. The cost of degraded standards is paid by other people. You do not allow degraded standards. Level 8, the operator who stays. 180A, Warrant Officer, Chief Warrant Officer. You are an 18 Zulu. You had the option of the Sergeant Major track. Administration, advocacy, institutional leadership. You chose differently. You chose to stay. The warrant officer is the ODA's second in command and the institutional memory that the rotational system otherwise cannot preserve. Detachment commanders cycle through on 2-year assignments. Team sergeants eventually promote off the team. The warrant officer remains. Sometimes for 15 years, sometimes for 20, accumulating operational knowledge across dozens of deployments in multiple groups, becoming the continuity that no other rank can provide. When the team splits, and the ODA splits constantly because 12 men covering a battalion-sized training mission across multiple sites is a 12-man force operating as two 6-man forces. You command the second element independently in a different location, running a different mission with limited or no communication to the other half for days, sometimes weeks. You are 180A. You recruit, organize, train, and advise indigenous forces up to battalion size. You are the team's expert on psychological operations, civil affairs, and cultural engagement. The human terrain specialist who understand that the decisive terrain in unconventional warfare is not the hill or the valley, but the population that occupies it. Outside the wire, no one outranks your operational experience. Inside the institutional hierarchy, the warrant officer path is quiet, less visible than command sergeant major, less legible to outsiders. But inside the special forces community, it is understood without explanation. The warrant officer is the man who chose mission over career trajectory. That choice is its own form of distinction. Level 9, the command, 18, a captain, detachment commander, 11 men. The most capable 11 men in the formation structure of the conventional army. Individually, you command them not through rank alone. Rank is the baseline of authority, not the source of it, but through competence, through the decisions you make under pressure, through the relationships you build before the deployment begins and maintain through every night it doesn't go according to plan. You are 28 to 32 years old. You have completed the Q-Course officer pipeline or transferred into special forces from another branch after the detachment officer qualification course. You are responsible. Legally, morally, operationally, and for everything your team does or fails to do. You meet with ambassadors. You meet with foreign ministers of defense. You sit in rooms with tribal elders where the power dynamic is not established by your rank or your uniform, but by whether you have earned the right to be in that room. And that right is earned by the work your team has done. The relationships your team has built, the capability your team has demonstrated in the months before that meeting. You execute the military decision-making process. You produce operations orders. You translate strategic guidance from group and SOCOM into tactical action, executable by 12 men in a country that may have no American infrastructure, no air cover, no quick reaction force, no margin for a plan that doesn't survive first contact. The officer career continues upward, major commanding a company B team, lieutenant colonel commanding a battalion C team, colonel commanding a group of 1,400 soldiers organized across 4 battalions. At each level, the institutional authority grows and the operational proximity decreases. You are at the level where it is closest, where the mission and the man are the same. Level 10, the cycle. Right now, tonight, a man is making a decision. He is 22 years old, or 26, or 29. He is a private who signed an 18X contract because something about the Green Berets caught in his mind and wouldn't release. He is a sergeant with 5 years of infantry experience who watched an ODA operate in his AO during a deployment and understood without being able to fully explain it that he wanted to be that. He is at a desk or in a barracks room or in a recruiting station holding a document that will set in motion a sequence of events he cannot fully anticipate. He doesn't know about the sandhills, about the 70-pound ruck at 0400 when the temperature is 38 degrees and the checkpoint is 4 kilometers through pine forest he can't see. About the peer evaluation that will remove men he considers stronger than himself. About the 2 years of the Q-Course, the 250 days of medical training, the Robin Sage exercise where the fiction becomes precise enough that the fiction stops mattering, the language school that will rebuild part of his cognitive architecture from the ground up. He doesn't know about the team sergeant who will become the most important mentor of his professional life. About the ODA that will become the closest approximation to family the military produces. About the deployment where he will sit cross-legged on a dirt floor with a cup of tea in his hand and conduct a conversation in a language he learned in North Carolina about tribal politics that will determine the operational posture of his team for the next 3 months. He doesn't know that the thing the Green Beret carries that no other soldier in any other formation carries in the same way is not a weapon. Though the weapons are real, the skills are lethal, and the capacity for violence is genuine and severe. The thing the Green Beret carries is rapport, the ability to sit across from a man from a different culture, a different language, a different history of suffering and survival, and to build. Slowly, through presence and patience and respect, the trust that turns two strangers into something that functions actions like a team, and from that team to build a force, and from that force to build a capability that outlasts the American presence, the American funding, and the American attention span. The Green Beret's ultimate objective is to make himself unnecessary. That is the hardest thing a soldier can do. It requires more discipline than any ruck march, more intelligence than any Q-Course exam, more character than any selection event can fully measure. He raises his hand. The cycle begins.